afternoon, and sorry about that. Welcome back to live from Netroots Nation. This is Kelly Lincoln coming to you on a stormy Saturday in New Orleans, and I'm sitting here with Stephen Shafarman, who is the author of Basic Income Imperative for Peace, Justice, Liberty, and Personal Dignity. And I would like to welcome Stephen to my table on this last day of Netroots Nation. Welcome. And
thank you, Kelly. A pleasure to be here. And it's been a very exciting couple of days here.
Indeed it has. What is your background with basic income, and how, because I think I know the people that are listening wants to know the how and why of what basic income is, what makes you the expert on it, as we all know that it's so easy to be an expert these days.
Yes, it is true. I've actually been working on these issues for a very long time. I first came across basic income in the mid-1980s, and just the more I thought about it, the more I found that this is simple and common sense and ought to be in practice. So I've been somewhat driven or obsessed about it ever since. Self-published. In the 90s, I was in a doctoral program in human development and doing research in the way young children learn to walk and crawl and walk and run and so on, and began playing with the metaphor of the body politic and saying that if we really understand how young children learn to walk and how in the process they outgrow crawling, maybe we could apply that thinking to the body politic so that collectively we can outgrow pollution, racism, crime, war, and other problems.
And how would basic income address that?
Well, that's exactly the question. And with that analogy of the body politic, young children learn when their basic needs are being met. And it's the most powerful and significant learning of our lives, learning to walk and talk. What I began to play with is the idea that when adults have our basic needs met, guaranteed, we can be much more responsible, mature, thoughtful citizens, participating actively in society as citizens, participating in markets as thoughtful consumers.
Now, as the devil's advocate here, since we are basically evolved out of a puritanical society since the first colonists, interlopers, or whatever you want to describe them as, were Puritans. They had a very, very strict outlook on life and work and all of that. And how would America overcome that puritanical thought of wealth? Because this is a lot with the people that don't like, wealth from the social safety net, when you are expected to care for yourself. How,
right.
Won't there be people to take advantage of this? How will this spur people to want to work? Because
that's one of the ways that I emphasize basic income is in terms of that core ideal of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. In a market economy, in a market society,
the general welfare.
I was going to get to that one in just a moment. In a market society, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness requires at least a bit of income to pay for food, clothes, and shelter. Yeah. And to promote the general welfare, I think even conservatives would agree that we should do that in the most direct and efficient way possible, and that is to provide everyone with a basic income. Now, on the work ethic questions that you touched on, the basic income is exactly that. It's basic. It's maybe $1,000 a month, given to everyone, so it's universal and unconditional. But nearly everyone, 99% of people, will still want to work and earn more. Will want to work in part because we are social beings by nature and we want to participate in society. We'll want to work in part to earn more money to buy homes or buy new computers or send our kids to school. The fact that is that today we don't have so much as a work ethic. What we have often is a coercion ethic.
Yeah.
and the notion that unless people are forced to work, they won't. So they cut welfare.
That Puritan ethic of the impossibility of pulling yourself up by your boots.
Yeah, but you can't pull yourself up if you don't have boots.
Well, you can't even if you have boots, it's impossible for you to pull yourself up by your own bootstraps because you don't have any leverage.
Yes.
And it requires leverage to stand up.
Yes, and basic income gives people leverage. It gives people boots and bootstraps and leverage to stand up as citizens, to organize with our friends and neighbors, to demand something more like a true democracy.
On another level, the biggest question would be, how is this paid for?
Well, and that's actually another question that distracts and deters most people from looking at the issues, because our government a federal government can print money at any time, and we see that regularly. And they just gave away $1.5 trillion to the very rich and to the big corporations. They're talking about another big tax cut to the super rich through the capital gains. And when it comes to doing something that is supposedly necessary, paying for it is never an issue.
Unless there's a Democrat in power.
Well,
and that's
true. I actually, in 2006, we got a bill introduced for a very small version of a basic income, but the Democrats controlled Congress at the time, and they were caught up in this pay-go mentality that you can't propose any new program unless you pay for it. Yeah. And so the Democratic staff members that we met with and the Democratic representatives were absolutely against even a small basic income.
So how would you then recommend that we as citizens go about destigmatizing the concept of the basic income? Because we know damn well that the highly organized meme warriors on the right will reframe it in such a way that nobody's going to want to deal with it, because we know they're going to reframe it in terms of illegals, in terms of stereotypes of black,
yes,
of citizens, black, brown, and some white people, but mostly in terms of the stigma, because we don't have that type of organization, because we're just like we are the definition of keyboard warriors. Right now, because that's all we do.
Too often, and that's a lot of what I talk about, is that in order to win a basic income, we have to actively talk with our friends and neighbors and build something more like a true democracy and stop being keyboard warriors. Well, in terms of immigrants, and one of the idea of a true basic income is that it's universal and unconditional. So it's some amount, say $1,000 a month, to every adult citizen. But that is a restriction that we are saying citizen, because a knee-jerk objection from a huge percentage of this country is obviously you can't give it to people who are non-citizens, or America just becomes...
This is why I was talking about the right meme warriors that have effectively hijacked things, because you talk about illegal, undocumented people voting. That is collecting welfare, collecting benefits, all sorts of things because they are not citizens, they cannot, and because people are ignorant of civics, because it hasn't been taught since Reagan in schools or everything. That's why you've got all this nonsense about, it's okay if the president can commit crimes, it's all right. There's and this whole nonsense
and
about
corporations can commit crimes, and CEOs can evade taxes and do other things.
And due to a side note in a Supreme Court, in a SCOTUS ruling back in the 19th century, corporations are people. And that, but that's the whole thing. We have to also, I think, to talk about it.
That's exactly. We have to change the political discourse.
And we have to talk and it's very hard because it sounds condescending, but you have to talk at the same level that the thought form in the White House is talking. You can't use big words, because big words are elite. You have to talk, you have to talk in things that everybody will understand, and let those of us with college degrees, be insulted at the level of
and
language
that's
being
exactly
used.
what I've been focusing on, is how can we communicate these ideas most clearly and simply and directly to ordinary folks. And
I think
one of the ways I
I
think we do
think
that
that's- I also
is to
think-
make it
yeah.
personal. So what would it mean for you and your family if you knew that you had an income of $1,000 a month for each adult in the family? And how would that affect your ability to make good decisions about where and how to live, and career and job and retirement and so on? To make it personal, because in the current political discourse, facts are fraught with complications and confusion and are immediately challenged.
I put it the other day. I forgot who I was. Brad Bauman was talking with. Was it Brad Bauman? Yeah. About that there are there's two competing consensus realities, and which one do we want to win? The groundlings, the base, on the extreme right, where their song is another national anthem from Assassins, which is a great song.
It's a great song.
It's a great
I
song,
love it.
and it's very true. Stephen
Yeah.
Sondheim is just like one of very astute observer in that regard. Or do we want, the consensus reality where everybody has an equal stake? Right now, we're pitting people, and that might be another way to go at it. Like you have a personal stake in this.
That's exactly right. And
too
these
often-
are ideas that Thomas Jefferson and John Adams and Thomas Paine and James Madison were actively debating back around the founding of this country, is how can we ensure that people have an active stake? And one of the solutions from Jefferson, Adams, and Madison was that everyone should have at least a little bit of land, so that people are stakeholders and can manage their subsistence. And Thomas Paine actually proposed a version of a guaranteed income.
Agrarian justice.
Agrarian justice. That everyone, upon turning 21, would get a sum of money to start their lives, and everyone at the age of 50 onward would get a yearly payment, a pension.
A pension, and basically Social Security before
Absolutely.
it was actively introduced by FDR.
And Social Security is another way that I often talk about basic income. Is that this, in effect, is like Social Security for all, though
Which
it's
is,
more
again,
social and more secure.
But then we also have to start reframing the word social, because that has become because it has been reframed highly negative. That people don't. That people
since
on the
the
right,
1980s, the word social and public have been.
But it has gotten worse, because now people don't even understand that. I don't want to pay property taxes, not understanding that that's how your roads get maintained. That's how your police department gets paid. Your first responders get paid. They don't want anything to.
Well, and again, I come back to Thomas Jefferson and the founders.
They don't see themselves as having a personal stake in their communities.
Yeah, and if people read the Declaration of Independence accurately, it says life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And to secure these ends, governments are instituted among men.
Exactly.
And that government is necessary for our personal safety and happiness.
Well, they don't. And then you have people that have said, well, then you have the preamble to the Constitution, and I've actually had friends of mine tell me, oh, well, that doesn't mean anything. Excuse me, that is the mission statement. And it's also become, because the first phrase, "we the people," was hijacked.
Yes.
And not "we the people of the United States," that's "we the people on the right."
Yes,
on the extreme right.
And the tribalism in our politics is horrendous, and you're right. And people on the right have hijacked patriotism and have hijacked the phrase "we the people."
Well, in my first little podcast, I haven't done this, but I open my regular Saturday podcast with the reading of the preamble to the Constitution.
Nice.
Because that encompasses what the mission statement for the board of directors. And I'm now going to freak out all the people that are convinced that America's really a corporation, and everything under the Universal Commercial Code. Oh my God, they're fascinating people, because it talks about to promote the general welfare, for us and our posterity, and just lays it out what this is all going to be about, and how,
to promote domestic tranquility
for us and all of,
to establish justice.
We're breaking back into a confederation rather than a unified state.
Yes, that's exactly right.
And that's why everything was going crazy at that point, because the Articles of Confederation were unenforceable.
Yeah, but you're absolutely right. And what we've seen is that the far right is, in fact, a neo-confederacy, a neo-anti-federalist.
Well, the League of the South has decided to put up a Russian language page.
Really?
Yep. They should be looked at now. And all the people whining about, oh, you're censoring me, you're censoring Alex Jones, freedom of speech. Yes, he's got the right to say whatever he wants to say, but he doesn't have the right to be free from the consequences of what he says.
Correct.
Just as you and I don't have the freedom, to be free of consequences. He's not. He's a fucking beer, conspiracy monger. He's not a theorist, conspiracy monger that doesn't know political bounds. Conspiracy knows no political party, but
Trump used to be a regular listener.
To make the claim, again going off that the parents who lost kids at Sandy Hook never really had kids to begin with,
Yeah,
and that and now he's suing. It's like you don't have that right.
And again, these are some of the reasons that in Basic Income Imperative and a new book that I'm writing, I present these ideas very clearly and simply and personally. What would it mean for you to have a basic income? What would it mean for your community? Because the Alex Joneses and the mainstream Republicans and even some Democrats so quickly pervert the discourse and twist our language against us.
Yeah, and I mean, I am the smartest person in my 200 square feet room, but that doesn't mean I can understand all the big words, or all the stuff that requires me to, to read something multiple times, and then I'm also living with traumatic brain injury, so sometimes I have to read something multiple times just so I know I read it. But it's still much easier for even a person with a high IQ with a degree in economics to digest it in everyday terms.
Yeah, and a lot of that is by design, because the economists are a priesthood and the political scientists are a priesthood, and they use their jargon and their presentation modes to exclude regular folks.
And the presentation mode is great when you're in front of your peers, but when you're talking to the public at large, even if some of your peers are in that audience, you have to remember that you still have to speak to the majority about.
Yeah. And that's what democracy is supposed to be.
In a language that is understood by everybody.
Yes. And the idea of what we have is a kind of inverted or perverted democracy, or an oligarchy or a plutocracy,
well, there's people
or
that want to repeal
corporatocracy.
the 16th, Amendment direct elections, which came about from the corruption at the state level. It doesn't matter. It's been corrupted. It doesn't matter,
True.
So just leave it as it
but
is,
the ideal of a true democracy is that every citizen has equal and effective opportunities to participate. And that's emphatically untrue today.
Yeah. I think it's been untrue for most of the history of this nation.
Sure. But I live in Washington, D.C., and I've been to Congress, and I've talked to members and their staffers, and I have to jump through hoops and make a great effort to get an audience with a member of Congress.
Because you don't count, because you're not...
But if I were a celebrity, if I was a donor, if I was rich and famous...
but you've got the awesome Holmes Norton.
She's a good one.
She's awesome. She's amazing. she's just an amazing
But
woman.
we don't have any senators, and she doesn't have a vote.
Well, I'm hoping to sit down with have an update from the fellow from DC Votes, and I am supporter of statehood for DC.
Good.
Or reabsorb everything but the capital area back into Virginia.
Yes, that's the statehood model, is that the Constitution specifies a federal district, but says
But
nothing more. And
Yeah,
so
but-
the idea is that the core federal buildings would become the federal
DC,
district,
yeah.
and the rest would become the Douglas Commonwealth,
Yeah.
is the name that people have agreed
that'd
on.
be great. That makes sense for DC.
Yeah, we get to
Yeah.
keep the labels DC.
And the flag and everything.
And
yes.
we've already got a constitution. They've already designed the flag to add the 51st star.
Oh, nice.
And I know a lot of the DC activists. In fact, when I first moved to DC in the fall of '99, I met some of the old statehood activists who'd been fighting this
Yeah.
issue in the 50s and 60s.
Because-
And one of the
and
things
that
they all
blends into
said
this
to
as
me
well.
is, don't ever trust the Democratic Party, because they will say nice things, but they will
So,
never follow through.
Everybody does that. You have to do it on yourself.
Yes,
and,
it has to be
and,
people organizing with our friends and neighbors.
And again, we were challenged by President Obama, be the change. And we all just sat back and said, hey, change us and do the change yourself.
Well, and the same thing
Do the
happened with
change.
Clinton.
Yeah.
People were elated when
But
Clinton
they didn't
won
want
in
to
'92, but they didn't
and
do
that's
the work.
the whole issue. Didn't want to do the work.
And so he was captured by Wall Street, and we got NAFTA, and we got China, and we got...
Benghazi and all that bullshit, and you got Scaife and all the other everything
Yeah.
because nobody would step up and have his back.
And that's why Netroots Nation is an exciting community, because these are people who are really committed to doing the work and being involved and mobilizing their friends and neighbors.
It is, it is basically that grunt work.
Well, it's the daily work of being a citizen. And that's part of why I'm so passionate about a universal basic income, is that it gives everyone a monthly reminder that we are citizens with a direct stake in making this country work. It creates a mechanism of true reciprocity between individuals and our government.
It brings up that obligation. We have a civic obligation. I mean, it's just like people not wanting to serve on juries. It's part of your obligation as a citizen to do that, I like to happily point out that the original concept of a jury of one's peers had to do with if you were a nobleman, you got a jury trial. If you were a commoner, you went up in front of you had a bench trial.
I didn't know that distinction.
Because initially, if you were a peer, you were a nobleman.
Peer, right. Of course.
And then again, if you want to get actually technical about it, if you're on trial for dealing drugs, your peers should be other drug dealers. You see why that doesn't work? But people have to understand that they have a stake in everything from that civic community level all the way up. And if they don't have that community level feeling of having a stake in how your city, town, village, hamlet is functions, then you're not going to care about the county level functionality, state level functionality, or even federal level functionality.
A true democracy is individuals talking with their neighbors about what is it that we want in our community, our neighborhood, in our local government, choosing representatives who will truly represent us and work with us to help us get what we want.
The best example of why consensus does not work is the United Nations.
Well,
one person says, no, it's, except unless you're in a jury, then you have to have consensus. But it all boils, again, we're going, I keep repeating myself because that's how I am. That I think it also has to start from, engaging people, and it's, and again, the biggest issue in engaging people is that political divide. Now, you think that New York City, for example, is liberal.
But the biggest issue is that individuals have to want to engage.
Yeah.
And the first responsibility is that as activists, we have to find ways to attract and excite people, to inspire them to want to engage. And
that's again, that again is the issue, because as soon as people hear basic income, they immediately think, "Ooh, socialism," and it's like pointing out that to people that think that thought that Iceland jailing all their bankers was awesome. We should do that here. You can't do that here, because this country is too big for that. The country is too big to jail. America is too big to jail, not the corporations. America. And that's the whole difference. And that's why you can look at why I was asking about the payment, But here's again, wouldn't the printing of money cause a massive inflation?
Actually, economists who have analyzed basic income say that we could easily afford this by eliminating programs that become superfluous. And so it's not printing money. And when I talk to our liberal and progressive friends, the first thing I emphasize is that what immediately becomes superfluous is all the so-called corporate welfare, corporate giveaways, because every time they're trying to promote that kind of stuff, and we have the national debate about Amazon's second headquarters, the stated rationale for it is to create jobs and promote economic growth.
It doesn't.
When everyone has a basic income guaranteed, people will be able to get by if they're unemployed. People will be able to manage while finding or creating jobs for ourselves, so that regular folks become the job creators.
Well, I consider I consider myself a wealth creator because I work. Therefore, I am creating wealth for the company I work for.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's what I think everybody has to understand. We're not workers. We are the wealth creators for the job creators.
Well, and I want to reclaim that term, job creators. The corporations are not simply job creators; they're exploiters. And
it's sort of like
what we have
hearing
today
Papa
is
John whine that he can't. If I give people a living wage and hourly wage increase, I won't be able to afford another mansion.
Yeah, well, and
What do you
again,
do with all
it
that
comes
money,
back to the question of a true democracy.
Yeah.
And
Or
I was just
the
talking
concept
with
of
someone
equity.
at the Roosevelt Institute,
Yeah.
which is a progressive think tank in New York City, and they've done a study, which was published last week, saying that if you calculate the money that the big corporations are using for stock buybacks, exploiting the recent tax cut,
I think
they could give huge raises to all of their workers.
I think they need to redefine greed in the DSM as another part of the hoarding disorder.
That's another way to look at it.
Because they're hoarding. What are they doing with that? They're hoarding. They're not using it.
And
although because we don't see people that hoard,
and we have to
hoard their
realize
money as
that,
being mentally ill.
Mm-hmm. And it is a mental illness.
And so let's start reframing corporate greed as a mental illness.
I think that's a marvelous idea.
Yay! I come up with a good idea today. Where can people obtain your book?
The book right now is online. You can order it through Amazon or other online. So it's Basic Income Imperative for Peace, Justice, Liberty, and Personal Dignity. And I crafted that subtitle to emphasize core values that can appeal to people across the political spectrum.
The preamble, the core values of the preamble.
Yeah.
To establish
justice.
Ensure we the people of the United States in order to form a more perfect union.
So people can order the book online, and we're
Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com.
Yeah, all of those.
Any bookstore that
it's not in stores.
Well, any online store that would have it, they'd be able to
get a hold of it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So on that note, Stephen, thank you very much for sitting down with me.
This has been a pleasure, Kelly. Thank you.
And this was great. Thank you very much.